With the Johnny Depp Amber Heard verdict looming large on the horizon, I want to offer a personal perspective on why this case is important to me. It is not something I want to do, and indeed everything within me is pushing back, telling me not to do it and to keep my head down. Nevertheless, I find it appropriate to offer my own personal contribution to the discussion. First, a disclaimer. I am going to speak about someone from my personal life. It is not anyone I have ever been publicly identified with. I say this because my ex-girlfriend appeared in a couple of my videos years ago when she and I were together, and I don't want to give the impression that it's her I'm referring to. She's great, and while we don't work together as a couple, we remain friends to this day, and I wish her all the best. In any event, on to more pertinent matters. I had not initially followed the Johnny Depp Amber Heard controversy owing to the fact that I had not been following the news in general when the story broke. I became aware of the details of the issue tangentially when accusations were made against Marilyn Manson. While I like Johnny Depp as an actor and I have enjoyed his movies through the years, I am not a ride-or-die fan of his as I am for Marilyn Manson. Nevertheless, when news of the Manson accusations broke, it was inevitable that a comparison be drawn between the two given their friendship and the similar nature of the accusations. Despite my Marilyn Manson fandom, I was initially on the side of his accuser, Evan Rachel Wood, finding her accusations to be credible at first for various reasons I've articulated in previous videos. Over time, I was forced to reverse that position as new evidence emerged. Still, I remained relatively ignorant of the Amber Heard controversy. I had seen memes on Facebook derived from the more sensational components of the matter, such as the severed finger and the fouling of Johnny Depp's bed, but I had stayed out of it. I do not like or follow celebrity gossip, and I find the public fascination with the lives of celebrities to the point that they are expected to function as paragons of moral virtue to be deeply disturbing. As the Manson-Wood controversy became something I blogged about, I decided to also watch the Depp-Heard controversy as their trial got underway. Make no mistake about how ignorant I was of this matter. I learned about the defamatory article mere days before the trial began. In the interest of not negating the severity of the charges on both sides of the matter, I resolved to go into the issue from a position of neutrality and hopefully be swayed much like the jury themselves. But when I began to weigh the arguments on both sides, one piece of evidence swung me harder than anything else. The audio recording of Amber Heard taunting and mocking Johnny, saying that nobody would believe he was an abuse victim because he was a man. To say that I can relate to that is an understatement. I know full well the terrifying reality of being abused by a woman who has not a single shred of restraint or hesitation because she knows full well that public sympathy will always be on her side. There are few things more horrifying to observe, much less directly encounter, than a malign person who knows that no matter how heinous their actions, they will always be perceived as weak and pitiful in the eyes of the world at large, and that as such they are granted a blank check drawn against the court of public opinion, and more so that they have no moral qualms whatsoever about wielding that blank check as a weapon against their victims. Hearing Amber Heard speak those words to Johnny while awash in an unrestrained malevolence born out of that very conviction was enough to sway me fully onto his side. I know all too well the kind of person who says things like that. I will not say or do anything to identify my relevant personal abuser here. That is not the point. I do not believe in cancel culture, nor do I believe in public crucifixion by way of social media. But even if I did, I still would not want to identify her because that would mean I would have to deal with her once again. Instead, I will articulate the effect that her abuse had on me. Simply put, because of her, I no longer have any desire or capacity to experience romantic love with another person. I do not say this lightly. Throughout my life, I have always had a deep inner confusion about whether or not I deserved to be loved by women. It was an inner confusion that was exacerbated by a couple of bullies in my school years who used to beat up girls for talking to me, and who made it clear to me on no uncertain terms that I was to have no contact with females. Nowadays, if a teenage boy told me something like that, I would laugh in his face, but at the time, when such people positioned themselves as the final arbiters of who was and was not socially acceptable, it had a devastating impact on how I viewed the world, and it certainly does not help that as an adult I've encountered men who echoed their sentiments. Throughout my adult life, each rejection and failed relationship added up in the back of my mind as if there were a solicitor in my brain making a case to the judge of my psyche that I was an invalid specimen for romantic involvement. The abuser that I am now referencing was the final and most devastating piece of evidence in the prosecution's case. My brain issued a ruling that no court of appeals has been able to overturn. I no longer experience romantic desire, period. Where once there was hope and longing, I now feel emptiness, an amputation carried out so thoroughly and efficiently that I have no phantom pains of regret or desire. It was a castration of the mind, done quick and easy. At the risk of belaboring the point, I will put it this way. Most of you will have read the book or seen the film adaptations of George Orwell's 1984. There is a sequence towards the end of the story where Winston, the protagonist, is arrested by his totalitarian rulers for committing a number of so-called thought crimes, not the least of which was falling in love with a woman. He is taken to a government facility where he is tortured almost to the point of death and eventually realizes that the only way to make it stop is to betray the woman he loves, delivering the iconic line, "Do it to Julia, not me." At that point, he is fully broken and no longer able to defy the ruling party and is released back into the world incapable of experiencing the very romantic desires that led him to defy the party in the first place. I am not kidding when I say that I find that sequence in the story to be comforting and liberating. When I watch Michael Radford's iconic film adaptation, I watch Richard Burton as O'Brien torturing John Hurt as Winston Smith, and I do not see a malicious government thug tormenting a weak and terrified prole. I see compassion and tenderness on O'Brien's face. I see one man kindly and sincerely wanting to free another man from the hellish scourge that is romantic desire. I know that citing Orwell is commonplace to the point of being cliché, but I am here saying with no hint of sarcasm and only the most naked and honest sincerity that I find that whole sequence to be beautiful and an act of real love between two human beings. That is the effect that the abuser in question has had on me, albeit as the final avenging angel on behalf of a lifelong series of people who sought to warn me off romantic relationships. I have learned in therapy that this experience of losing the ability to feel or desire romantic love is consistent with the diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder. That knowledge alone, however, has not been enough to restore my capacity. So when I saw Amber Heard saying those mocking, acidic words to Johnny Depp, I was immediately on his side. I realized that this is often what happens in such public cases. People are compelled to take sides not on the basis of the evidence, but rather due to the projection of personal traumas onto the psychodrama playing out before them. Nevertheless, I can fortify my visceral reaction in the bulwark of the evidence which overwhelmingly favors Johnny Depp. Nowhere is this more evident than in the closing arguments where Johnny's team laid out a thorough and complete step-by-step explanation of every single lie that Amber Heard told and every single act of abuse she committed, buttressed by exhaustive amounts of evidence, while Amber Heard's team saw fit to browbeat the jury with preemptive admonitions that failing to side with Amber Heard would send a message to survivors of abuse that they would never be believed, and then attempted the last-minute Hail Mary pass of saying that Amber needn't be a victim of physical or sexual abuse in order for her argument to be valid, that instead the abuse from Johnny could be emotional or psychological. This is in brazen defiance of the fact that Amber Heard started this whole debacle by alleging specifically physical and sexual abuse. Finally, Miss Heard's team brought out the most ridiculous idea of all, that Miss Heard was innocent on the grounds that Johnny had not been able to prove that he never abused her. This is a failure of sound legal reasoning so profound that Saul Goodman himself would never have seen fit to trot it out. No accused person is required to prove a negative. It is the job of the person making the accusation to make a case supporting their accusation, and the job of the respondent to present evidence and argumentation which renders the accusations weightless. Make no mistake about the nature of this trial. Johnny may have been the one to bring it to court, but his was the defensive position. Amber Heard is the one who began the prosecution of Depp in the court of public opinion, and her arrogant, incompetent attorneys conducted themselves in that vein throughout the trial. In light of the glorious and, I must confess, deeply cathartic beatdown carried out by Johnny's attorneys, the publicity arm of Team Amber Heard, namely the apparatchiks that masquerade as journalists, were quick to play the only cards at their disposal: guilt and fear. One opinion piece after another emerged to proclaim that the collective support for Johnny Depp was motivated by deeply ingrained cultural misogyny and a long-held disdain for women who claim to be survivors of abuse. They further expanded upon the implications of the trial, proclaiming that failure to vindicate Amber Heard would kneecap the ability of future women to come forward with claims of abuse. Some voices, such as the Vanity Fair article I previously commented on, even carried these dire implications into the realm of logical absurdity by weirdly trying to imply that ruling against Amber Heard could have deleterious effects on the survival of Roe v. Wade or increase levels of police brutality against minorities. It is my opinion that such people view social progress as a kind of Jenga tower, one balanced precariously and never more than a single bad move away from toppling completely. They appear to be of the belief that no persons within a society could actually uphold the progressive values they champion, and as such must be constantly beaten over the head with endless badgering about those values, to the point that the public at large is won over not by appeal to their better nature, but rather beaten into submission. To be clear, I cannot claim to know what truly motivates such people, but I find it impossible to conceive of anything else. I would like to think that underneath it all, they really and sincerely do hold their positions on the basis of personal integrity and a sense of doing what's right. If that is the case, I would appreciate it if they returned that acknowledgement with a mutual recognition of the fact that people on Johnny's side really are, at least on the whole, motivated by their support for what they see as an innocent man. Sadly, I'm not hopeful for such a recognition. Eve Barlow, Amber Heard's own personal minion, tweeted that if society fails to believe Amber Heard, then society ceases to exist. The pro-Amber Heard side is staking nothing less than the survival of the modern world on Miss Heard's vindication. It is impossible for me to take such a position seriously, especially when one of the most popular retweets for hashtag #IStandWithAmberHeard is a video of an obnoxious adolescent girl putting on makeup while telling the camera that there's women on the pro-Johnny Depp side masturbating to audio of Amber Heard being abused. If such audio exists, it should have been entered into evidence rather than staking Miss Heard's entire argument on a series of pictures of Johnny sleeping in odd positions and a single video of him abusing a kitchen cabinet in the course of an argument. Let the record show that while Amber Heard is a lot of things, a liar, a grifter, a con artist, and a physical and psychological abuser, a cabinet is definitely not one of them. If those standing with Amber Heard were to genuinely understand the course of socio-political history and the story of the human race, they would understand that denouncing women like Amber Heard is the progressive and, dare I say, feminist position to take. The idea that women are fragile, delicate, pristine porcelain dolls forever beleaguered by the brutish nature of the world at large is a notion deeply rooted in the patriarchal systems of the past that contextualized women as having innate value for their reproductive role and held them as saintly for their ability to maintain virginal purity. With that as the basis for a society's conception of womanhood, a challenge to a woman's honor was something that men were willing to fight and die over. It is a notion that women like Amber Heard have leveraged throughout history for personal gain at the cost of women being treated like equals in the eyes of their male counterparts. I do firmly believe that if Johnny Depp were alleging the same abuse with the same supporting evidence against another man, absolutely nobody would be taking that man's side. Benevolent sexism is still sexism, and Amber Heard's invoking of it is not a forward-thinking attitude about women, nor does it do anything to advance the role of women in society. It simply employs a long-standing knee-jerk reaction for her personal gain. But those standing with Amber are right about one thing. This is a watershed moment, and there is more at stake in this trial than Johnny Depp's reputation and career. This trial is a crucial shifting of tides, one that could serve to dissuade women like Amber Heard from believing that their gender precludes them from reproach in the court of public opinion. One that could finally open the public discourse to discussion and awareness of male victims of abuse at the hands of women. And because of that, it gives me a small modicum of hope. The abuser I discussed earlier from my own life was someone who held the truly terrifying belief that she could get away with anything because of her gender. I have not heard from her directly in a long time, but I consider her to not be truly gone from my life, only in remission. In the time since, I have learned that I am not alone, that there were many men before me and there continue to be many men after me. Her abuse continues unabated, and there is no shortage of men ready to be ensnared. I comfort myself with the knowledge that eventually she will age out of being the hot little sex kitten that can tempt men into relationships and eventually be ignored altogether, her reign of terror brought to an end by the very biology she has exploited for so long. I want to go to those other men and tell them that they aren't alone and that they aren't crazy, but I can't bring myself to do it. You might be tempted to say that it is hypocritical for me to here be talking about an abuser from my past when I am condemning Amber Heard for doing the same thing. Simply put, that is not what Amber Heard has done. She went well out of her way to make sure the public at large knew exactly who her alleged abuser was. That is something that was more than demonstrated at the trial. I, on the other hand, have said absolutely nothing to identify my abuser, one, because the point of this commentary is to talk about the effect that the abuse had on me and nothing else, and two, because I am genuinely scared that my abuser will see herself in this commentary and come out of the woodwork. But Johnny Depp gives me hope. It gives me hope that my abuser is wrong in her belief that she can manipulate public sympathy in her favor. It gives me hope that people like Amber Heard will know that they cannot exploit the suffering of real victims to advance their careers, and it gives me hope that I am not the crazy one. That is why I stand with Johnny Depp. Kind regards, Jordan.